everyone's thinking the same thing. I don't belong here. If they only knew, people wouldn't like me if they knew XYZ about me, if people knew how bad I didn't know the financials, or how my wife hasn't talked to me in 6 months, or how, like, I've heard all the stories. Don't review all the things you've done bad. Like, don't show up at a networking event and go, man, if they knew my last business failed, none of these investors would want to give me money. Like, and a lot of us do that. We just scroll through our failures and then wonder why we don't have the confidence to show up in these situations.
On this episode of MSP Mindset, I'm super excited to speak with April Garcia. She has traveled to 45 plus different countries, experienced amazing things like cholera, dysentery, rabies, and what we're going to talk about today, which is self-sabotage, burnout, those sort of things. So she is amazing at helping masterminds and helping others with our Pivot Me brand. So welcome, April.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited for our chat today. I love how you connected like infectious disease with burnout. That was awesome.
You never can tell.
No, it's good. It's good.
So I wanted to jump right into one. Apparently you were voted least likely to succeed in high school.
I was. That made my reunion a little bit awkward when I went back. Yeah, I was a pretty troubled kid. So it's funny to look back now, but I was on a very different trajectory. I kind of get this like photos or it didn't happen talk usually. And I was like, oh, well, luckily there is photos for evidence. But yeah, I was a troubled kid, and I had like the white face and the black lipstick and the knee-high combat boots. And yeah, I was definitely the kid that most people like crossed to the other side of the street when they saw. You did not miss me in the crowd. But it's kind of funny to think about now, but there's still that edgy side of me. Like there's still punk April in there. But it looked like I was going down a very predictable path, which was not a good one. And then when I was 18, I just flipped a switch and everything changed. But up until then, most people were thinking I was going nowhere fast.
Well, tell me about how you went from, according to, high school kids,
the experts,
right, going nowhere, to, running a mastermind, teaching people about mindset, teaching people about sabotage, running all the things that you do, helping so many people. Let's start with flipping that switch at 18. What happened?
Yeah, great question. So, when I was younger, when I was a teenager, like I struggled in a lot of ways, but I always sort of knew that at 18, that's when you had to sort of let go of all that stuff. Like that's when you're an adult, that's when you could actually go to like big boy jail. And I always knew, even as a young misfit teenager, that I was like, all right, when I'm 18, I flip the switch. At 18, I'm out of here. I couldn't wait to move out. I couldn't wait to leave the country. I didn't grow up like that. I did not come from a family of travelers at all. And the idea of wanting to travel was just insane to them. But I knew that it was like, all right, everything changes at 18. I'm going to totally redesign myself. Once I have sort of autonomy, that's when everything's going to change. And sure enough, when I turned 18, I had bought a ticket to London. And I distinctly remember that moment when I knew nothing. I'd never traveled, never knew anything about we'll say the streets of London, got mugged shortly after. But I remember when I got off the plane in Heathrow and I walked outside and there was like the smell of diesel in the air and it was humid, and I came from the desert. I live in Nevada, and I'm looking around and I distinctly remember this feeling of nobody knows me. Nobody knows my backstory. Nobody knows who I am. Nobody has any expectations of me. There's no peer group around me. And I just decided this was the time I was going to be completely different. And I literally reinvented myself. I reinvented myself through that trip, through travel, which ended up becoming a pretty significant part of my life for a long time. I ended up going to college. I put myself through college. I couldn't get any scholarships or anything because of my high school years. Ended up becoming like dean's list and who's who, and just, talk about this 180 turnaround. But it was this conscious decision to become a different person, to reinvent myself. And it also, honestly, it came down to peer group as well. I remember we're getting right into it, but I remember a very distinctive night when I came back from London and I hung out with my old group of friends. And I'll never forget, they were in this like small little sweaty apartment down in the bad part of town. And they were all, well, hopefully we can talk about this, but they were all smoking. And I was just kind of sitting there and feeling like, I don't really feel like I'm not like fitting in. It feels different this time. And I'll never forget a friend of mine who was 17, 18 at the time. And I thank her to this day. She said, "Can I talk to you outside, April?" And we went outside and she said, "April, what do you want to be now? Because that's all changed. Like you're a completely different person. What do you want to be now?" And I said, "Well, now I want to be a doctor and I want to do medicine overseas." And she goes, "Yeah, we want to own a pot field in Hawaii." And she's like, "I don't think you belong here anymore." And at the time, it felt like massive rejection. Like these were my people, these were my friends. They'd become like family to me. And in a lot of ways, they saved me through high school. But that was a time where that's where the pivot happened. And again, it felt like rejection. But I look back and I'm so grateful that she did this because she kind of booted me out of the nest and said, "Go find your people." And then I did. I ended up finding a different peer group and evolving and changing and really completely changed who I was. So much so that people didn't even recognize me. And they were looking at pictures of me in the yearbook to go, it was that girl. Remember her? It was a pretty significant pivot.
Yeah. So after you got rejected, how did you go about finding a tribe?
Yeah. I mean, first there's like a lot of tears and a lot of like, why did this happen to me? And
Sure.
you know, that's the thing about sort of leveling up, which I didn't have that language at the time. I didn't really understand what was happening, but it's a lonely process. It's not, rarely does this new peer group go, come with us, it'll be better. It just feels a hell of a lot like rejection, whether it's you being rejected or you rejecting the other people. And so it took a little bit of a time to adjust. The good thing was I was going to university and I had 2 jobs because I was doing the college thing. College is expensive. And so I started making friends through the hospitals that I worked at. I worked at 2 hospitals. And then I started joining studies groups at the university. And that helped too, because the old group that I hung out with were not in the study groups at the university. Like they didn't go to college. And they were on their own path. And we didn't intersect after that. So started going to study groups, starting to find people. And now I've got language for it. It's one of the things I talk about a lot, which is designing your peer group, which is very different than our default peer group, kind of the people we went to school with, the people we work with, or we live next to, or our kids play with their kids. And I, like many others, had just kind of fallen into my default peer group. And they served me and they were amazing. And I served them and we were great friends for a long time. But then as I grew, I had to go out and find the new peer group that represent where I was going, not where I was. That part is painful, by the way, since I've done multiple iterations of that. But it was real tough because those were like my people. They knew me. And then because I had such a massive shift in identity, even though you're, this goth punk kid becoming like, now I wear scrubs and I work nights at the hospital, you don't feel like you belong there either. So you're just in this weird spot where you don't feel like you belong with your old group. You don't quite feel like you belong with your new group. It was quite a transition. Luckily, I did find my people through school, through work, and then it just kept evolving then. But that was one of the first real big sort of peer group pivots I ever did. And it was not by choice. It was Sarah putting a boot in my butt and kicking me out the door.
Yeah, thanks
Sarah.
That's awesome. So you had massive imposter syndrome. Yeah. I can relate to that.
Oh, for sure,
right?
for sure. When I worked at the hospital, I don't know how this happened, but somehow I ended up as the process improvement committee's like chairperson. And so like, imagine if you will, this 19-year-old girl that still has midnight blue hair. And she is now managing the process improvement committee, which has a bunch of doctors on it who do not want to listen to said 19-year-old does not want to listen to someone with blue hair. I mean, there was just, I was in lots of situations where, I was odd man out. I spent a career, the first half of my career was being in rooms I really wasn't welcomed in. Eventually I just became really comfortable with that. But that was my first real massive dose into imposter syndrome. And then I got into real estate investing and a bunch of other stuff where I just kept recreating environments where I was usually the least qualified, youngest person in them. And then I just learned how to swim faster, I guess.
That's really interesting. And I want to get into self-sabotage, but I think these might correlate here. So how did you get comfortable with that being uncomfortable, that being the new young kid, the imposter, the whatever, however you want to frame
Yeah.
that?
I mean, a lot of self-talk, like managing your mindset. Again, I didn't have the language for it then, but so much of it, you know, I see often that we're not always, the door isn't always locked to the rooms we want to get into. A lot of times we anticipate that the door is locked. Like more often than not, I see us self-select before anyone else says, you're not good enough, leave. We anticipate the rejection. And so we're like, I'll see myself out. And I saw that more often than people not getting in. So I want to clarify, I mean, we've all seen like the Peter principle. We've seen like the arrogant guy who works half as hard, but he keeps getting promoted. And you're like, what the hell? Like, I mean, I definitely remember that guy when I was first started in sales. And I kept looking at this guy, Jason. I'm like, why does that guy keep getting promoted? And he was just arrogant enough to think he should. And it worked. And I saw so often people were just, they talked themselves out of these opportunities. So I just kept, it's the boldness to keep like inserting yourself. Really what you've got to figure out is, can you withstand the awkwardness of being in a room where you're not welcomed? And if you can, and that's not, you're not physically getting pushed out on most of these instances. It's just subtleties, it's nuance. It's kind of like, well, shouldn't you be over there? Shouldn't you be that group? Shouldn't you sit at that table? If you can withstand the awkwardness, usually you can still maintain at the table. Nobody wants you at the table. It's going to take a long time. You got to do a lot of proving and this and that. And that's a tough road too. But I would just say manage your mindset. Be very clear that you don't self-select. Like is someone telling you to leave, or have you picked up on subtlety? Have you picked up a hint and you saw yourself out?
Did you go in expecting that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And a lot of us do. And a lot of us can't withstand the awkwardness of feeling like the outsider. I've always felt that way. And so I've always just like, I'm going to go into a room. I mean, again, I didn't have language on it when I was in my early 20s, but I knew that if I was going to learn, I had to be, you want to be a better tennis player, you got to play with better players. I knew that. And so I just kept putting myself in rooms where people were better than me. The mistake I made is I didn't find mentors, though. I kept putting myself in rooms where people didn't want me there, but were better than me. If I could go back and do it all over again, I would have been on a hunt for a mentor in a hot second. That would have shortcut so much, but I didn't know that at the time.
What pushed you to discover that?
The mentor piece, or?
Yes.
I watched other people's path be shortcut to success over and over again because they had mentors. When I look at my trajectory, for a long time, I worked in sales, I worked in finance, I worked in telecom, and I eventually got to the point where I was, advising really large business, billion-dollar businesses. I've had a great career in that, in manufacturing and distribution. And what I found was the way that I was going about it was a bit stubborn. Like, I will figure this out. I will be the hardest. I mean, let me tell you, if you're one of those people that are like, I'll be the hardest working person in the room. I was that person. I still struggle with being that person a lot. It is the hardest path to success. There is nothing shortcut about this. And let me tell you, if anyone tells you there's no shortcuts to success, it's total bullshit. By the way, can we cuss on this, Damon? Is it all right? Okay, we're good. All right, good. I was like, let me know that. Okay.
Be you.
Okay,
Yeah.
So there are shortcuts, and a mentor is one of the fastest shortcuts, and it's the one I did not use. I didn't get a mentor for probably about 7 years ago was the first time I got a mentor. And what I did do, though, is mentor a lot of people. And even now, the work that I do now as a business advisor, honestly, I just want to be the mentor I never had. Like, I just want to find versions of, that's what so many of us want to do, right? We want to find versions of ourselves that we could help in the way that we wish someone would have helped us.
Have you ever wondered if you could recover your backups? Let me ask a better question. Have you ever had a backup fail to recover? Have you ever lost data? Yeah, that's me. Here's what's crazy. 58% of recoveries fail to recover. So if you think it's just you couldn't be more wrong. What are we going to do about that? Well, you've got two options. Enter Servosity. What we do, what we exist to do, is test your backups and manage them for you. We test every volume, every single day. We do weekly testing, monthly testing, and quarterly testing. And you can hand off the drudgery and babysitting of backups and the day-to-day management to our team that monitors your backups for you. It's time to level up your backup game. One way you can do that is visit servasi.com/learn more if you'd like to take the process that I've spent the last 18 years building and steal it and apply it to your MSP so that you can level up your backup game. Check out the link below in the description or visit servasi.com/learn more. So if you were speaking to yourself, 20 or 30-year-old self, what would you say about finding a mentor? What would you say to do?
I would say don't do it alone. I would say stop being so stubborn that you want to figure it out all on your own. And I would say that you have to put yourself in the room with people who can and are willing to mentor you, to ask people directly to mentor you. The way that you approach sales is, you have to get through a lot of no's to get to the yeses. Mentoring should have been the same way. It should have been, I should have approached it the same way of like, all right, I'm going to find the right people. If I keep being in rooms of people who aren't the right people, well, switch up the rooms until you find the right person. There's somebody going to be out there who really wants to see someone like you succeed. You just got to find them. But I was my own bottleneck for sure. I was stubborn, or, I think I got, even though obviously all of us, right? Even though I showed up bold and confident and all this sort of stuff, I was still up in my head that I'm always the youngest person in this room. It's not so much a problem anymore. But for a long time, I still remember my first networking event, and I showed up and I was 20. I was working in the financial industry, and I walked into a room full of what looked like my dads. And I was like, well, What do I talk to these guys about, right? So, and then I go to the bar, which was kind of cool because they give you a drink because they assume if you're there, you're old enough, right? And so I'm like, what do you drink? I got a Coors because, it's the king of beers. Turns out it's actually not the king of beers. It doesn't impress anybody at a networking event. But I was like, what are we going to talk about? The weather? And I really felt like an imposter in that instance, in many instances. But, I wonder what it would have looked like if I would have sat down with someone at that networking event and just said, this is my first networking event. I don't know what to do here. Instead, I very much lived into the whole fake it till you make it thing. And it served me, yes. But I think my path would have been a lot easier if I would have just kind of shoulder tapped someone and said, I don't really know what I'm doing here. How does this work? Where do we go? Where do we stand? What the hell do we talk about? Is it weather the whole time? Is it sports the entire time? If I would have just been courageous enough to ask for help, it would have helped a lot. I mean, it really would have shortened my path, and I would have worked a lot less hours, and I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more too.
Yeah, it takes a ton of courage to do that, right? Because if you're like me, I'll speak for myself, I already felt like an imposter. So to go and ask, I mean, they must have been just come out of the womb knowing this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I'm the only one that doesn't know.
Totally. I remember I was talking to a guy who was working with I think he said the CEO of AT&T. And I'll never forget, he said, I sat in a meeting with her, and over again, people would introduce concepts that she was not familiar with. And she'd say, oh, I don't know enough about that. Teach me. And he said, I would be sitting in a meeting, and she would say that 4 or 5 times, and she's the CEO of AT&T. I'm pretty sure it's her. The idea, and I only heard this a few years ago, and I thought, well, heck, I wish I would have known that a lot of years ago. I think I was focused on being their peer. And if I would have allowed myself to, or put myself in the position to be a little bit more of a mentee, there would have been someone who would have taken me under their wing. When I hear the stories of oh, this person mentored me, and there's part of me that goes, I wish younger April would have known about that. But I mean, if you're listening now, and now I have mentors, now I lean heavily into this. Not only do I mentor others, but I have people that mentor or coach me. I mean, if you're listening to this now and you can't think of a mentor, that's a problem to fix right away, because you are doing it the hard way. And I did for so long. I just can't imagine what it would have been like for someone to come alongside of me, or for me to ask someone to come alongside me and go, hey, which way, right, left? How does this typically go? Because so much of it was me figuring it out on the fly. And I definitely went the long way around because of that.
So talk to me about the self-sabotage there. And I know I like to mentor people. I enjoy it. I'm looking for the right person, to help. And when I was younger me, I was like, I don't think I can reach out to them. They won't take the time. What do I have? I had all this self-sabotage, this head trash holding me back. So what have you experienced? What kind of self-sabotage have you let play into that?
Me personally?
Yes.
I think it's, again, I would have a different answer now, but I think, I think it's, I've experienced it and I've seen it with so many people that I work with, is just the fear of being found out that you don't know the answer to it, which in actuality is a strength when you're like, I don't know about that. Tell me more. I think it's fear of being found out. A lot of what I see now in my consulting practice is people thinking they're so far along, they should already know this by now. Like, I've been running this business for 6 years. How do I not know what my profit and loss statement is? I've been doing this for so long. Nobody knows that I can't actually successfully hire someone because I keep, making bad hires. Like, there's a lot of, especially at this stage in business and in life, it's a lot of, I feel like I should already know that by now. And also, will they think that I don't belong here anymore? And it's such a shame because we're all thinking it. One of the exercises that I do when I have in-person events is we talk, I like say, okay, I'm going to talk through some of people's self-sabotage or some people's head trash right now. And if you're brave enough, I'd like you to step in the circle when I say the thing that you've thought since you've walked in this room. And I list things. I list things like, I don't feel like I belong here. Lots of people step in. I feel like my revenue is too low for me to be here. A lot of people step in. I feel like these other people have it figured out better than I do. I've compared my messy backstory to their highlight reel. Like, whoever you're sitting next to, you can go, man, that guy is super fit. That guy seems really happy in his marriage. That guy has a great relationship with his kids. We always take the thing that we struggle with and compare it to someone else's, trophy moment. And then it's a great opportunity to sabotage ourselves. It's a great opportunity for us to be like, no, I can't speak up. I think it's really important for us to realize that we all have something to teach and we all have something to be taught. And I think for me, I spent so many years trying to prove myself that it would be hard to know what April needed to be taught back then. Because I was trying so hard. I was trying so hard that I think that if I would have been more humble and if I would have been more honest and if I would have been more brave, it looked like bravery me being in those rooms all the time. And to some extent it is. But the truth is, for me, what I'm most scared of was vulnerability. So courage actually looked like vulnerability. It wasn't showing up. It wasn't showing up in those rooms. It wasn't traveling overseas. You put me on a plane and I can show up in any place. And I'm like, got it. Wherever it is, got it. No problem. That looks like bravery to other people, but it's not bravery to me. For me, that feels okay. It feels comfortable. Showing up and saying, this is hard for me and I need help. That scares the shit out of me.
Yeah. That's a ton. Let me unpack that gift there, April. So, I think a lot of people would raise their hand and say, hey, just showing up in a room where I feel like an imposter, where I'm the youngest or dumbest or least revenue or whatever label I want to put on myself. I don't feel qualified to be here in one way or another. That's going to scare enough of us. Sure. But you really have to have courage to be vulnerable. So to tie together what you said, it sounds like what you were saying is, younger me, I wish would have the courage to be more vulnerable, because that sounds like it tied into the coachability. Yeah.
I got to think about that. For sure. It's not like I had people offering to coach me or mentor me and I'm like, no, I got it all. But I also just wasn't putting myself in that environment either. For sure. When I look back at so many pivots in my life and so many moments in my life, if those would have been paired with if those would have been paired with vulnerability, I would have navigated them so much better. In fact, one of the exercises that I do in my company is I'll challenge someone on asking for help for something. And these are all business owners, right? These are all like self-starters. I got this, and I'm like, all right, well, something that you're struggling with, and I don't care if it's finances, your retirement, your relationship, your health, you got to go ask someone for help. And that is the most common exercise people skip because they don't want to do it. They don't want to admit that they don't have the, even if it's not something in their expertise. Like they could be running this successful manufacturing business. And I'm like, no, you got to ask someone about if they have a personal trainer or a therapist they recommend. Essentially just getting in the habit of raising my hand and saying, I need a little help. And that is so tough for us and has been historically very tough for me. I'm getting better at it. It takes a lot of practice. But to do that, I also have to manage my mindset that everybody, I mean, now I've sat with thousands of business owners and I know that everyone's thinking the same thing. Everyone's thinking the same thing. I don't belong here. If they only knew, people wouldn't like me if they knew XYZ about me. If people knew how bad I didn't know the financials or how my wife hasn't talked to me in 6 months or how, like I've heard all the stories. I soured the relationship with my kids. Like we've all got, everybody has a chapter of their book they don't read out loud. But then we show up in places where we're insecure and all we do is review that chapter. Like, oh, if they knew this. And that's a confidence thing too. Like one of the things I really I have a very tactical thing that I have people do if they need to show up confident in situations. But I'll give you a spoiler, don't review all the things you've done bad. Like don't show up at a networking event and go, man, if they knew my last business failed, none of these investors would want to give me money. Like, and a lot of us do that. We just scroll through our failures and then wonder why we don't have the confidence to show up in these situations.
Right. And you have a lot of wins. Right?
We all do.
But I don't know about you, but I'm often too busy replaying the game footage of what I didn't do right. I could have had a record year and I'm going through all the, there was this one hire that I fumbled. There was this one, whatever it was that I could have and should have figured out. Could be an amazing year. And I'm still just microanalyzing, self-sabotage. Why couldn't I do this?
And you got to get in the habit of catching yourself. You have to manage your mindset at all times, like mind that. One of the things that I like to sort of illustrate is, like our brain, I think of our brain as actually like a separate entity all the time. And it's something that you're training. You can't let it train you. Your brain's, this 3-pound organ that, random thoughts come up. You're not your thoughts. Random urges come up. You're not necessarily your urges. It's what you act on. You act on the thoughts, you act on the urges, but you got to talk back to your brain. And that's applicable whether we're talking about your insecurity, whether you're talking about your anxiety, talk back to your brain and you will start to, there's a whole science behind it. You'll start to create new neural pathways and things like that. But most of us are just a series of practice thoughts. And if you can hear, one of the most important things that I can teach someone is how they self-sabotage. If they know that.
Tell me about that.
What was that?
Tell me more about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's in,
because we all do it.
We all do it. So for every level you're at, you will sabotage, and we all do it in very predictable levels. So in the Pivot Me Academy, in the mastermind, we talk a lot about the second you level up, new level, new devil. So the second you level up, I don't care if it's from a revenue standpoint, the client, whatever it is, it's like Super Mario Brothers and a new dragon gets let off in the castle. Okay, the devil's coming out. We don't know who it is, but it's coming for you. And it's a variety of things. And I see it every single week on these calls. So it might be, this is the biggest contract I've ever signed. And then suddenly they're like, I should have gotten an MBA. My dad was right. Like all these very predictable patterns we all go into of, I'm not good enough to receive this money. I'm not good enough to work with clients this big. If they only knew this, if they only knew that. And if you know the predictable way in which you sabotage, then you can talk back. Like the second you know it, you've got the power to change it. So I was sharing that on my team when I'm about to be on a really big stage or have a lot of media attention, I get hypercritical about our website. My team knows this. The second we have a big interview that's coming out next week, my team knows, I've already done it to them. They know if they're listening right now, they know that suddenly I'll go through at 9:00 at night, or maybe it's 4 a.m, and I'll get real nitpicky about our website. Because it's, your website's your digital footprint, it's your sales page. And suddenly I'll get really particular about that. And I will spend precious hours going, the wrong there. It's not there, it's there. Or this image doesn't, the lighting's not right. Or I'll get really particular about design, which is not my forte, and usually something I don't spend any time on. but it's because I want to know that when they go and look at me, that it's validated. It's just an insecure thing. And it's like, well, how am I still doing this with the experience I've had and all the accolades and all the this and that? And yet here I still sit. I don't know how many businesses I've owned. I've owned a lot of businesses. I've owned a lot of real estate. I've done all these things. And yet when I'm about to get a lot of media attention, I will go through the website and get nitpicky. So that's one of my flavors of self-sabotage. And I'll give you another one, which is a really common one. So a friend of mine, an amazing speaker, amazing author, Roy Vaden, and he talks about what is the word? It's procrastination. It's creative avoidance. It's a form of procrastination, and we all do that. In that, you've got a lot of stuff to do, and sometimes it's really important stuff to do, and you will go and do something that doesn't actually need to be done, but you could justify that you were still being like effective. So I'll do this with my emails. I'll have a really big project and suddenly I'm like, well, it seems like a good time for me to go through my emails, or I'm going to go check this or look at the analytics on that. It's this creative avoidance is a huge way people procrastinate. Like, okay, I've got this really big important meeting that I need to set up and the guy's waiting for my call. And then someone's like, I'm going to go talk to the bookkeeper, or I'm going to go do this other thing, or, we should talk about product development. And all it is fear. Usually it's fear of doing the big thing, taking the big swing. And so we creatively avoid it by doing other things. So if you learn, and this is key. So a lot of people talk about high performance, and I'm a big fan of high performance talk too. But I will tell you, you will get so much mileage out of just understanding how you self-sabotage and then what the hell to do about it. Bonus, if you bring in an accountability buddy and you tell them how you self-sabotage so they can call you out. So they can say, are you avoiding calling the publisher because this is the third week you haven't called them? And you're like, maybe.
That's so true.
Right? So let's just start with the baseline. We all self-sabotage, every single one of us. We do it in very predictable ways. And if you can find the predictable way in which you do it, then like first comes awareness and then second comes choice. And so once you're aware of it, most people aren't, but once you're aware of how you self-sabotage, then you can address it. And you address it by talking back to your brain. You address it by bringing in accountability buddies. There's a variety of things you can do to address it. First, you just got to know how you do it.
I love that. We all have it. I know I have.
For sure.
A ton of stuff there. So I was very fortunate to select an accountability partner over a decade ago. Awesome. And believe it or not, same person still. And so it's been one of the best gifts because we got vulnerable early on. And, after so long, we know each other better than most anybody about what we're going to, I guess your words or his words are creative avoidance. Let me go. I mean, it could be anything, right? I'll go mow the grass. I don't know. Like, I don't want to mow the grass, but it just feels like there's a thing I could do instead of do this hard thing. And so, there's just so many ways that I could do something else and procrastinate. And just having an accountability partner makes all the difference, at least for me. Yeah. Because they're saying, I know this is the thing you're avoiding. Why are you waiting another hour or day or week, or if you don't have somebody, month, quarter, year.
It's so true. I mean, what you did probably shortcut your success profoundly. I mean, and the person, I want to point something out. Your accountability buddy does not need to know anything about like the mechanics of what you need to do. So one of the things I talk about is how SMART goal format kind of falls short. And one of the ways that the SMART goal, which is the goal standard, done. But the thing about SMART goals, which are good, but what they miss is the accountability piece. They miss the who component of it. And it's not, yes, we manage what we measure. You can set a goal, whether it's a fitness goal or a revenue goal, doesn't matter what it is. And we want to measure it, yes. But what I will tell you will help people tremendously is if you build in people to help you do it. And I don't just mean your team. And I always recommend people build in 3 people, but one of them is the accountability buddy. I always say the networker, the accountability buddy, and the mentor. The mentor is someone who's already done it. They've gone before you and they can say, hey, do this or do that. The networker is someone who has the network to support the thing you're about to do. Oh, you're about to open up a new business. I know someone at the SBA. Oh, you're about to license a product. I have a great lawyer for that. That's the networker. But the third piece of that is the accountability buddy. They don't need to know anything about the mechanics of what you're doing. It could be a brother, a sister, a spouse, but that can get a little sticky. But all you need to do is just tell them what to ask you. It can be like, hey, every morning at 9 a.m., can you text me and ask me what my word count is? Every morning, I have a guy that I've worked with for 5 years, Christopher, and I will text him and say, did you get your walk in? Because as simple as him walking in, I was like, what's the big deal? Walking 30 minutes. Well, when Chris walks 30 minutes in the morning, Chris listens to a podcast that's inspirational. And then he goes back and he does more outbound sales calls in his real estate business. And then he does this. It becomes this chain reaction of productivity. And for him, it all starts with walking in the morning. So the person who's your accountability buddy doesn't have to be good at your thing. You can literally say, ask me this question. I've done this before. Ask me this specific question. But just knowing that someone's looking at you, someone's going to check in with you. We manage what we measure. And when there's more eyes on it, we feel the pressure to deliver. So that is a huge technique. It's just using an accountability buddy. Don't use an accountability buddy that struggles with the same thing that you do. I will add that caveat because a lot of people are like, I'm going to work out and I'm going to work out with Tina, who also hates working out. No, you guys will end up at Starbucks. Nobody's working out. Like you need to work out with like Karen down the street and you see her every morning at 5:30 in her Lululemons running down the road. Like Karen, that's who you need to work out with. A lot of us will pick accountability buddies that have the same problem we do. Don't do that. That's not going to end well. But pick someone who will send you a text, ask if you did it. They'll check in with you. They'll just remind you of the things that are important to you because otherwise our life is filled with OPP, other people's priorities.
That's exactly right. I love that because so many people talk about maybe an accountability partner, but they stop there. So different, we all struggle with something. Just don't have it be the same thing that if Karen can work out, but Karen, maybe you can help Karen in this other way,
Totally.
whether it's showing up to something or doing something courageous or making calls or whatever that is. And then I wanted to unpack like how you talked about you text this person and they walk, but it sounds like kind of second order effects. When they walk, they listen to the podcast. When they podcast, they make more calls. So tell me about that. How you see those kind of, because it's kind of in this world of instant gratification, it's easy to just want to do the easy and instant thing. And going for the walk, you don't always see an immediate benefit, but that podcast has that benefit that gives the benefit to your mood and to your mindset and to your calls and to all these sort of things. So tell me how that ties in from your perspective.
For sure. So in all of our lives, we have these chain reactions, right? Like so if someone's familiar with business and like lead and lag indicators, like there's things that lead into a result and then there's effects after that result. And so let me start with this premise. The most important topic you'll ever study is you. The most important thing you can be a student of is yourself. Like you should be the CEO of you. You should be running the owner's manual. Most of us are totally flying blind. We don't have an SOP. We're like, I'm just gunslinging out there. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Like stop reading books about other people's lives. Stop watching documentaries on other people's lives and learn yourself. This is not self-indulgent. This isn't navel gazing. Like know what creates performance in you. And part of it is understanding your cycles. We're so freaking predictable. I know we want to all be so special and unique, and we are kind of. But what I can tell you after working with thousands of people is we're actually rather predictable. And I don't say that to kind of dim someone's light. I hope that it gives someone hope that it's like, oh, well, wait a second. Then there's a way for me to get out of this. So understanding what your cycles are, that's a key piece for performance and for sabotage. So like for sabotage, I had a guy that before he would go have an important meeting, he would say he woke up late from his alarm, which on the surface is true. He woke up late from his alarm. But what I would do is I would pull back the timeline and go, okay, we'll talk to him about the night before. Well, the night before he would go out and he would stay out late and he would drink and then he would sleep through his alarm the next morning. And it was a self-sabotaging cycle that he was in. And actually, once you pull on the thread a little bit more, it's because his business had already grown bigger than his father's business. I mean, there was like a whole bit of psychology to it of like, oh, wait, I can't grow my business any bigger than that. But let's kind of keep it surface level. It appeared like he needed a new alarm clock, but he didn't. He started self-sabotaging the night before, and it was quite predictable. So for him to understand himself, for him to be a student of himself, he had to know before a key meeting where I'm going to meet investors, I need to not go out the night before. I need to have a night at home. I need to be in bed by 9. Like that was key for him. So this is an example of understanding sort of the chain reaction. The guy that I referenced who was walking in the morning, he didn't realize at first that walking was so significant. What he realized is that he felt really inspired when he listened to podcasts, but he never made the time to listen to podcasts. And we sort of paired that with the fact that he wanted to exercise more, and then he really likes walking. And long story short, it took a little bit of digging to realize that this ended up being this sort of net activity, no extra time activity, where he could walk, listen to the podcast, and then this chain reaction happened afterwards. Those chain reactions happen a lot in the morning. That's why everybody's so obsessed with the morning routines and stuff. I mean, there's truth to it. There's a tremendous amount of truth to it. It's because it sets off these chain reactions in your day. Likewise, you get up late and it sets off a whole different set of chain reactions in your day. And so just understanding the step before, a lot of people will look at the issue of, Adrian, who I mentioned, wouldn't get up when his alarm would go off, or, Chris would get up too late to walk, or whatever that is, or myself. I have lots of ways that I self-sabotage too, spending precious time looking at the website instead of preparing for a big, interview, for example. Understanding how that chain reaction occurs and then go back to the step before it and change the inputs. That's how you change the output. A lot of people are focused on the output. I want this, I want this, I want this. We need to be focused on the behavior that led to that, good or bad. And once you understand it, and here's the thing, if you can't figure it out, or if you're struggling to, or maybe you just don't want to admit what it really is, because we've all been there too, like ask someone that you trust that can speak into your life. Maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a best friend, maybe it's a sibling, but if they know you well enough, or someone who's worked with you for a long time, they know exactly how you self-sabotage. And so and that's one of the powers of the mastermind. I'm a huge fan of masterminds. I highly, again, I wish I would have had mentors when I was younger. I wish I would have been in masterminds when I was younger. People will speak into your lives in those, like the right mastermind with the right dynamic. They'll say, oh, are you doing that thing that you do? Like, you didn't set over that proposal. And this guy was really big. Why didn't you send over that proposal yet? Like they'll push back on you a little bit because they start to memorize the way you self-sabotage too. And also what gets the best performance out of you. Man, if you know that about yourself, it is powerful. Invite accountability and it's exponential.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I had learned that.
Right.
That part so much earlier, right? Because I heard you talking about that and I was like, I think she's talking about me, in what you're just saying there.
All of us.
Totally.
It's all of us.
Yeah, it is. I want to step back a few paces there and talk about the 3 people, right? You mentioned the accountability partner and the mentor. Those, I guess I'm more familiar with. Obviously, I understand the concept of a networker, but is this your own little personal mastermind or advisory board? Do they change based on the year or your circumstance? Tell me how you envision those 3.
Great question. So that framework is based off of my own framework. It's called The Anatomy of Goals. It's not the next book, but it's the book after that. So I'll let you know when it comes out. But the Anatomy of Goals are based off of that you really need 3 people to go after your goals. What I will tell you is the way to succeed at your goal is not endlessly researching. Let's just stop right there. That is absolutely a massive form of self-sabotage that I see over and over again. I've been guilty of it too.
Hey, be careful with what you say. That everybody listening here, me included. What do you mean? If I just do a little more research on the thing.
For sure.
That's a great way to do creative avoidance.
That's exactly what it is. Yes. It is. Yeah. And I will tell you now, let me start with, I do this, done this. I am like, if I've got a PhD in anything, it's that. That is one of the primary ways that I self-sabotage. So I went to school to be a scientist. So I got a degree in biology and chemistry, and I love the science. But the truth was, in a lot of ways, having a degree now, okay, I can spin it that it's like, oh, I approach personal development and business like a scientist. Yes. But the truth is, my science background has hurt me many times as an entrepreneur. Because in science, you are constantly testing hypothesis. You don't make a claim until it's irrefutable evidence, et cetera, et cetera. Running a business is a lot more loose than that. It's a lot more of like, I got half of the data points I wish I had. I'm just going to go ahead and go ahead without it. So in this way, this is something that I struggled with as an entrepreneur, because there is not nearly as much science as I would like in business. So it's kind of like a gut feel of like, this or that, we can make both of them work out. Science doesn't work that way. And so I endlessly researched for a long time, and most of us do. And I would literally put a report together on how to do something. And in my mind, I was like, oh, well, I did it on my own time. Like when I was advising large companies, in my mind, I'd go, well, I did it on my own time. And well, your time's valuable too. It doesn't matter if you did it at 10 o'clock at night or not. When we endlessly research, it's really a form of insecurity. It's a way for us to be beyond reproach and go, look, but I looked at all this data. I looked at all this information. The most successful people that I've seen out there, they move ahead with 50, 60% of the necessary information. They move ahead with less information than I myself am comfortable moving ahead with. And I've had to learn from those people. I was speaking to a president of a company called Creative Works, a guy who's become a good friend, Armando Lanuti. And I'll never forget, he said to me, April, it's just that I don't believe any of my moves are fatal. So good. And how many of us think that our moves are fatal? How many of us think that endlessly researching will protect us against either failing our business, a loss of money, or just us looking stupid? Like, that was my, like, I don't look prepared. I always wanted to be prepared. I was always the person coming in with the tidy reports and the this and that. And it was really just a form of insecurity. So if you are in endless research, you're not shortcutting anyone's success by endlessly researching. If you want to prioritize fitness, go find someone who's fit. If you want to write a book, go find someone who's written a book. And I know you originally asked me about the 3 characters in my Anatomy of Goals. So it's the networker, the mentor, and the accountability buddy. And mentor is obvious, the person who's done the thing, and they can give you tips. But the networker, sometimes the mentor and the networker are the same people. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes you talk to someone who's written a book, and they can tell you exactly how they wrote a book, but they don't have a network. They're a recluse. They're introverted. They didn't make a network, and that's okay. It takes all kinds. But a networker, or a maven, which is actually my primary company's name, is a connector. It's an expert that connects people to other people. That's specifically why I called the business Maven. I love connecting people. Connector is who I am through and through. Find someone who is a connector, and they will shortcut your path. They'll say, oh, you know what? You want to climb Everest? Well, I know a guy who did that. I'll connect you with him. Oh, you want to start a new business and you want to buy a laundromat? Oh, I know someone who did that. Let me get you with them. Oh, you need a financial consultant? I know someone who did that. They have a network, and they will always point you in the right direction. I'm going to come back to, but we have to be secure enough to ask for help, admit what we don't know, and receive that help. Because most of us, I had a friend who was in financial trouble, and I knew that I could solve the financial trouble he was in, but he would refuse to let anyone help him. And I was like, oh, buddy, I've been there, but it's not going to help you. And only when he finally said, okay, fine, I'm out of my depth, someone help. And people came in, and it got solved. And 6 months later, a very different financial position. But it takes a lot of courage to be willing to say, I need some help. And to say it as candidly as it needs to be said, versus like, oh, I just have a couple of quick questions for you. That feels different than going, I am way out of my depth here. Like, tell me how you did this, because I have no freaking clue. If you have the bravery and the courage to do that, there will be people that will help you. But would it help if I explain how you find those people? Because sometimes people go,
yeah, absolutely.
Where do you find them?
And before you explain that, before you do that, you covered 3 things. I need to receive the help. Tell me the 3 things again, and why those are important when I ask for help. To be ready to receive the help. You talked about.
I said about candidly saying it versus like, oh, I just want to pick your brain, which sounds a lot different than how bad you need help.
And maybe the other one was being vulnerable enough. But yeah, because I want to get into that a little more, because at least in my experience, if I'm going to go do something I've never done. I don't know. I've never tried to launch a rocket to the moon, a real rocket. I'm going to have to go and say, I don't know anything about this. Like, that one seems a little more, I got to start from zero. But where I'm the worst is where I have these kind of near, if I think I'm kind of decent, I might say I have a few questions. I might not think I need as much help. On the other side of that, every time I have been vulnerable and been courageous and just said, I don't know what to do, I need your help, and been very direct, is when it's worked the best. But it's when I have these kind of, areas of somewhat competent, like maybe I'm not an expert, but I'm not completely ignorant or incompetent. And that's where it sneaks in. And I don't come and approach it that way. So help me understand, how do you kind of see around that blind spot? How do I not make that same mistake?
I think that's a great point. Honestly, as you said that, I'm like, God, you're absolutely right. And that has been the case. I've done that many times too. Like, the thing I'm most at risk at is the thing that I know a little bit about to be dangerous, because it's almost like I know enough not to be vulnerable and ask the questions I need to ask. Like, I should know about this thing because I've, dabbled, I've known a little bit. Great question. Right. I would say that it's better to look like you know nothing than to look like you know something. Many people are actually quite willing to teach if you are a good student. It's not fun to teach a student that pretends like they already know the answer to. So it's funny. I've had a lot of people ask me about coaching, and I was kind of a strict business advisor for years and years and years. And then about 5 years ago, I branched out to coaching as well, and sort of business advising and strictly looking at the business and the product launch and the distribution and how to scale and things like that. But what I found was that the coaching piece was missing, because you could lay out this great sales plan, but if the VP of sales was a high functioning alcoholic, it didn't tend to work as well. Or if they've got these blocks and, they're struggling with vulnerability or admitting they don't know the answer, it's hard for them to effectively run their team. Anyway, so I end up pairing coaching with it. And someone asked me, well, it takes a good coach. And it's kind of a cheater answer, but the answer is a good student. And I've spent a lot of years trying to coach people who didn't want to be coached. And probably I think at first I was probably a bad student too, because I wasn't being honest about what I needed to be coached in. And so, for a lot of reasons, feeling like you didn't belong anyhow. And that's one of the things that, again, if you could go back and be honest about what you need to know and default to not knowing anything versus showing that you know a little bit about the topic. Because I definitely have made that mistake where I'm like, well, I do know a little bit about it. And then maybe they make some assumptions, or maybe they think that you don't need as much help as you do. It's better to be the fool than be like, oh, well, I know some things. I just have a couple of questions. Like, if they're ready to open up and tell you all the things, like, sit down, pull out your pen and paper and take notes.
So if I'm listening and I'm sitting there, and maybe somebody is, because I'm sitting there going, whenever somebody leans in and asks the question and gets vulnerable, is when I go, why am I not that? Why am I not doing that?
Yeah.
So how do I become the best student? If the answer to the best coaching is the best student, how do I lean in and embrace that?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, I will tell you that not everyone is a good student. A lot of people they just want the highlights, like, give me 2 bullet points, but I don't actually want to hear all the pieces, and I don't want to do all the work. I, as you said that, I'm reminded about, I became a real estate investor when I was pretty young, and I didn't know any other, again, mentoring would have helped a lot. The best I had was like the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book, the Robert Kiyosaki book. And then I had Millionaire Real Estate Investor, the Gary Keller book. That's where I started buying real estate, and I knew nothing. In fact, the first townhouse I bought, I didn't have money for the down payment, so I took an advance on a student visa at 27.9%. It was a bad deal, but anyways, it got me into the house. So when you become a real estate investor young, everybody wants to know how you did it. Like, everybody's going, how did you do this? How did you learn about this? I didn't know anyone. I literally knew no one who was doing this. And in fact, I have a picture of my first closing, and I showed up with that same blue hair with overalls on, and everyone thought I was in the wrong building and was like, oh, the coffee shop's down the street. I'm like, no, I'm buying a house here. So when I when I became a real estate investor, a lot of people wanted to know how. A lot of people that were friends of mine were like, teach me how, teach me how. I would have been happy to teach anybody how to do it because I learned through excessively researching, pouring through books. I read every book I could. For the books that I couldn't afford, I just sit at Barnes & Noble and read them all and then put them back in the shelves. Like I did all of that stuff, right? Because there was no like bigger pockets or house hacking, like all the stuff that, and there's so much information available now, but 20 something years ago, there wasn't. And it was much, much slimmer information. And I wanted to teach somebody so bad how to do it. Nobody actually would do it. I mean, maybe it was just the people that I knew. But over and over again, I saw that people wanted like a couple bullet points, but they were not willing to do it. The amount of times I would say, yeah, show up at my property on Saturday. I'll be there doing improvements and I'll teach you everything I know. I offered so often to teach you everything I know. Nobody took me up on it. Like if they showed up, they would show up maybe once for an hour and then they got to go, they got to this, they got to that. So I just want to say that if you're a good student, you're already ahead of the curve. So that's one of the things, excuse me. That's one of the things I want to point out is being a good student, meaning showing up on time, ready to learn. You're already ahead of most people. Also respecting the time of your mentor. But when your mentor, and the way you respect it is showing up on time. And if someone shows up and they don't have a pen and a paper to take notes, come on. Like you're going to be asking me the same question over and over. Like respect my time as the mentor. But I will tell you, if you're willing to show up vulnerably and you're like, all right, I'm ready to be taught. Please teach me. Most people don't do that. They just don't. I mean, people go and pay for seminars that they never execute on. I see it all the time. I mean, I love seminars too. I love in-person events. I host them. I attend them, all the things. And yet the majority of the people never actually execute on any of the stuff. So if you're going to show up and you're going to respect the mentor's time, you're going to be vulnerable, you really want to know what they have to teach, they're going to be open to that. Most people, especially like a contribution-focused person, a legacy-oriented person, they want to pass on their information. I want to pass on my information. I mean, I said at the beginning, the thing I'm so passionate about is being the mentor I never had. It's because I fought so hard for the lessons that I've learned, and I don't want them to go to waste. I want them to pass on to as many people as possible. And I think there's so many potential mentors out there that feel exactly the same. There's actually a massive lack of mentees out there for them to pass it on to. Mentees that'll actually show up on time, do the work, take notes.
Yeah. But speaking of kind of tying it back to self-sabotage, at least in my experience, I was afraid. I was afraid to ask. And then I would be freaking out about showing up, and I would show up on time and I would have minutes. But I remember the first time or two I did this, I was just imposter syndrome. Yeah. Like if I asked April, why would April give me her time? She's so amazing and successful and she's coached thousands of people. And so I would just get into my head, like I can't do this. I'm not ready. I'm not able. I'm not, fill in the blank, whatever you want to sabotage about. I'm not smart enough. I didn't go to the right school. I don't, whatever excuse, right? So how do, for anybody listening to this going, man, that sounds a lot like me.
Yeah.
What's the next step?
Well, a couple of things. So when you're saying that, the question I would first ask is, what are you afraid of? Like, I know you're afraid, but like, what is it? Like, if I was to ask you, what are you afraid of? Are you afraid that your mentor is going to think that you're not smart enough, that you're not capable enough, that you haven't earned the right to ask their advice? Like, what's the fear?
Yeah. So I kind of like you, I'm kind of framing because the old me was like, I can't ask anybody. I shouldn't share anything. I don't want to be vulnerable. I need to know things. I need to show my value by contributing. And it's when I learned about being mentored is I need to shut up and listen and take good notes. Maybe ask the occasional good question, but I can still resonate this because I love your quote, right? A new level, a new devil. And so as I've leveled up and gotten more and more interesting, successful, whatever word you want to put in, mentors, I still showed up with a similar, and I think it goes back to that insecurity. Like, what if they realize I don't belong here? And they say, leave the room. You shouldn't be
Yeah.
here. Right. And so once I get into it, if I force myself to do it and show up after a few times, I go, okay, maybe I could be in the room. But whenever I get into a new, it's like somebody was saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, get in a different room. So when I get in a different room and now I'm the dumbest person in the room, or the mentor is really great, I still go right back to that same insecurity of like, now I'm the new kid, I'm the youngest, and so that same insecurity comes back out.
Yeah. Well, it's going to come back to what I mentioned earlier is, can you withstand the awkwardness? Can you withstand the discomfort of being in the room where you are the dumbest, where you are the least successful? I mean, that's really what it's tied to, because people talk about leveling up your peer group, and I'm a fan of it too, but it's not about, oh, how do I get these people to hang out with me? It's, can you withstand the awkwardness of knowing you might be the least successful person in the room? I had a friend that was in a networking group, and he was in it for about 6 months, and it was time to renew. And he said, I'm not going to renew. And I said, why? And he goes, well, everybody in there essentially said everyone in there is super, super wealthy. And so they kind of have a different conversation, and they're kind of talking about different stuff. And he's like, I just sometimes feel left out. And he's like, so I'm going to discontinue. And I was like, and when you discontinue, you guarantee that you'll never feel comfortable at those tables. But see, because, Steve Harvey says if 9 of your friends are broke, you'll be the 10th. But I would argue maybe the opposite is true as well. As 9 of your friends are rich, you'll be the 10th. Like, if he would have sat at that table, would he, because we just level up, Tony Robbins always says, I think he actually got it from Jim Rohn, but like, we're the 5 people we spend our time with. And it's around the expectations of our peer group. If he would have stayed in that circle for long enough, that would have felt normal to him. And then it's like, oh, this is what we do. Like, when people say they want to run a marathon, I was like, great. How many marathoners do you know? Wow, I don't know.
That's right.
And I was like, start there, because this is part of the design peer group that I was talking about. This is the book that I'm almost finished with now. The design peer group is hanging out with people that normalize success in the thing you are about to do, whatever it is. So it might be your first marathon. And I'm like, all right, go hang out with people that did a marathon before. Like, do not endlessly research how to run a marathon. That's where most people start, because it's comfortable, because our ego gets to stay protected. Like, people want to, a lot of people don't want to come out. But on a tangent here for a little bit, but in social media right now, there's a big push about like hustle in darkness, and then you'll come out and show them your results. In my mind, this is utter bullshit. Like, the second I hear that, I was like, no. The only thing you do in that situation is you protect your ego. But if instead someone watches you in pursuit of something, even watching you stumble at something, man, someone could actually learn from that. Nobody learns from your successes. People learn from your failures and your ability to get back up again. So I understand the need to protect a new idea when it's young and fragile, because there are going to be people who come out with sledgehammers and they want to bust your new idea, your new business. You can't run a marathon because you're this, that, they bring out all their reasons why it can't happen. I understand that. And you do have to protect your new ideas against that. But I really want to encourage you that when you share your path, including the stumbles, other people see that, wow, that's available for someone like me. Like someone who has kids, someone who has been through a bankruptcy or a divorce, or is a business owner or not a business owner, or has a degree or doesn't have a degree, because we all have these lenses of insecurity that we're trying to see things through. We never see things as they are. We see things as we are, right? And so if I'm trying to look at a scenario, but I've got but I don't have an MBA. Oh, I'm not a business owner. Oh, but I mentioned that when I do my in-person events, I have people, I talk about what people's narrative is, and they step into the circle. It's called the step in the circle exercise. What was fascinating to me is the first time I had this event, I didn't think of it until day 3. It's a 2.5 day event. The third day, I got this idea to say, if you've been divorced, step into the circle. And 5 or 6 people stepped in the circle. And one of the guys stopped, and he's like, oh my God, and like clutches his chest. And I said, what? This entire time I've sat here for 3 days thinking I was the only person in the room who'd been divorced. He said, everybody's talking about their partners and their happy marriages and da-da-da. And he said, in the entire time I was up in my head and this is a guy who runs a successful law practice. He's, this happy-go-lucky guy who's in a committed relationship. But the entire time he felt insecure. He wasn't walking in reflecting on all the things he's done well at. We often walk in just focused on our wounds, right? We walk in with these lenses of insecurity, and his massive one that was distorting his entire experience while he was there was that he believed he was the only one there who'd ever been divorced. And we see that in business owners all the time, where they think they're the only one who's gone through bankruptcy, or their businesses, they had to close their business. If we get more honest about those things, and that takes a ton of courage, we'll start to see that 1, you're not the only one. 2, there's other people in the room. And 3, people are inspired by your courage. When you share your story, your messy backstory, and I'm a work in progress on this too, when we start to share it, we empower other people to share it too. We have to show people that it's available to someone like us. And this is true whether we're talking about goal setting. If you want to run a marathon, hang out with people who run a marathon. You want to do 75 hard and you're telling yourself, I can't do 75 hard because I've got young kids at home. Go to lunch once a month with people that have done 75 hard and have kids at home. And suddenly your excuses won't seem so significant. Feel like you can't write a book because you're a bad writer. There are other people that aren't good at writing and have written books. So the whole premise of a design peer group is just hang out with people that normalize success in the thing you're about to do. And then suddenly it just feels like, oh, this is what people do. This is possible for someone like me.
That's awesome. So I think I could spend the rest of the day talking with you, but to be a good steward of your time, I won't. Tell me about your book. When is it coming out? Tell me more about it. How do I, if I'm listening, get plugged in?
Yeah. So it's not available yet, but you can get on our list. I assume it's going to be in the show notes too, but my website is theaprilgarcia.com. I'm the April Garcia on pretty much every platform. And you can sign up there for our newsletter so we can let you know when it comes out. But it's about designing a peer group for success. It's about curating the people around you to support the next version of you instead of the previous version of you. Most of us are living with our default peer group. And not that those are bad people, but those are people that maybe we didn't have intentionality when we brought them in. But if we're hanging out with lots of people that are unhappy in their relationship, they all they get together is talk about how hard running a business is. If they talk about how bad parenting sucks, I'm not trying to throw shade on those people, but they're probably not enjoying the width and the breadth of their lives. And if you want to go out there and live a kick-ass life, grow your business, and really enjoy the ride, you got to be around people who do that too. So the premise is just curating the people that are around you to support that next version of you. What that next version of you requires is not endlessly researching on Google. It is not YouTube videos. It's not listening to I love podcasts. I love YouTube videos. I love books. I am a total book nerd. But if I manage my mindset, I talk back to my brain, if I know how I self-sabotage, and if I surround myself with people who have achieved the thing I'm about to achieve, and bonus, build an accountability buddy, you're unstoppable. I mean, those are the shortcuts to success right there.
That's amazing, April. That is so good. If anybody is just getting chills and they can't wait to get connected, to get your help, to get coached, get a mastermind, whatever it is, how should they reach out? How should they connect, follow, whatever you suggest?
Yeah, I would go to my website. That's the easiest way, theaprilgarcia.com. I obviously run the podcast, the April Garcia Pivot Me podcast, have for 5 or 6 years now. We release every Thursday. That is a great way to connect. But sort of the two-way communication where I can actually respond back is theaprilgarcia.com. And you can even book a 15-minute chat with me. I just started doing that about 6 months ago. I love talking to people. I mean, you probably get that. Like, I'm a people person, right? Is why a lot of consultants at this point go into just public speaking and that's it. And though I've done a lot of public speaking, it's one-way communication. And I love to talk to the person and understand them and their business and how their business affects their family and their health and all that sort of stuff. And so I started this thing a few months ago, maybe not 6 months ago. And I don't know how long we're going to keep doing it, but book a free 15-minute chat because I'm like, ask me anything. We'll hop on a call and I'll answer some questions for you. So again, I'm super passionate about being the mentor I never had. And that's an extension of that.
I love that. So if you're listening, take advantage before she comes to her senses and gets too busy and takes that away, or, you're looking for the right mentor just to pick April's brain. Don't miss out. So go visit theaprilgarcia.com gothicapril.com and take advantage of April's bad judgment or good to pay it forward, whichever you want to call it.
Don't ask me stories about bad judgment. You're going to go back to the high school years again. They're like, show me a picture of Gothic April. I have them.
We got to feature that, right?
I got it. I got you covered.